everyone, welcome back and thank you for tuning in for today's episode. This is Beyond Borders, and for today's subject, we will be talking about the case of Robert Pickton. I'm your host, AJ.
And I'm JH.
By formally introducing ourselves, we are a group of high school students and are currently in the process of making a true crime podcast for an English project. With each episode, we aim to shed light on the intricate and frequently tragic stories behind some of the most captivating cases in history, while also highlighting the most arduous work of law enforcement officials and investigators who have dedicated their lives to seeking justice for the victims and their families. So join us as we explore the secrets and complexity of some of the most fascinating cases of our time by venturing deeply into the world of true crime.
But before we begin, we'd like to advise and give a disclaimer to our audience that the content we talk about is all information that we found on the internet, compiling them into one video and meaning no harm or disrespect to any of the individuals we speak of. This podcast is solely for educational and entertainment purposes. A few content warnings before we start. A lot of our cases are heavy, so if the following topics may affect you negatively, feel free to click off this episode or watch another that is more suitable for you. We will speak of gore, suicide, rape, extreme profanity, and violence.
Welcome back to Beyond Borders, the podcast that delves deep into some of the most intriguing and chilling cases that have captivated the world. I'm your host, AJ, joined by one of my co-hosts,
JH.
Today we're going to explore the shocking and disturbing case of Robert Pickton, a Canadian serial killer whose actions sent shockwaves through society.
So let's start by setting the stage. Who is Robert Pickton, and why is he such a notorious figure in the true crime world?
Robert William Pickton was a pig farmer from Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Born on October 24, 1949, Pickton was eventually convicted of murdering 6 women, but is suspected of being responsible for the deaths of many more. His crimes took place over several years, from the 1990s until his arrest in 2002. He was described as an eccentric and reclusive individual who kept to himself and had limited social interactions, and often had his farm cluttered and disorganized. Pickton's farm was located in a rural area and was known to have a penchant for collecting various items, including junk and discarded objects, which contributed to the messy appearance of the property.
Feed my daughter and all the niggas in the struggle, you know what I'm saying? It's all good, baby. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine.
Join us on an unforgettable journey as we unravel the enigmatic persona and musical genius of the notorious B.I.G. and Tupac. From their rise to stardom to the tragic events that forever changed the rap game, the Coast Rivalries leaves no stone unturned. Stay tuned.
In this podcast, we're going to be following the lives of Tupac and Biggie, focusing with segments on their and the meaningful lyrics behind their music. Following along, we'll also have special guests joining us, such as Esther Ludlow, who will be sharing a very insightful opinion on her research about the cases.
Stay tuned for our first episode coming out very soon.
What really intrigues me the most is the fact that Pickton's behavior raised some concerns among those who knew him. There were reports of him being involved in illegal activities, such as selling homemade alcohol and drugs, including marijuana. He also had encounters with the police prior to his arrest, but he managed to evade these serious consequences. Despite being suspicious and concerns, Pickton managed to maintain a relatively low profile, and his crimes went undetected for a significant amount of time. It was only after an extensive investigation, which began with an unrelated search of his property, that the full extent of his horrifying crimes came to light.
It does seem that he was mentally not in the right mindset. I believe that he should have gotten extensive care, and for those who sat around and watched, it really gives us an insight of today's cruel society, where others would rather sit and stay silent instead of addressing obvious issues.
Not to mention that people nowadays simply film accidents. People are dying and others are shoving devices up their throats for social media content.
While it is believed that Pickton had deep-seated psychological issues, possibly including a personality disorder or psychopathy, such conditions can lead individuals to engage in violent and criminal behavior, lacking empathy or remorse for their actions. Perhaps the bystanders were afraid?
I would not blame them. I mean, what he had done to his victims is quite severe and uncomfortable. One of the most chilling aspects of the Pickton case is the scale of his crimes. He targeted vulnerable women, many of whom were sex workers from Vancouver's downtown Eastside neighborhood. The number of potential victims is staggering, with some estimates suggesting that the actual count could be over 40 or even higher.
Pickton targeted vulnerable women, luring them into his farm under the pretense of providing them with money, drugs, or a place to stay. Once at the farm, he subjected them to horrific acts of violence and torture. He murdered his victims through various means, including strangulation and stabbing.
After killing the women, Pickton disposed of their bodies in various ways. Some remains were allegedly fed to his pigs, while others were buried on the farm or discarded in nearby areas. Due to the extensive nature of an investigation and the size of the property, authorities were able to recover human remains and forensic evidence that ultimately led to Pickton's arrest and conviction.
He sought to seek power and control over others, and his crimes can be seen as an expression of his desire. He targeted vulnerable women who were marginalized and engaged in sex work, exploiting them for their precarious situations for his own gratification. Their lives were tragically cut short by Pickton's actions, and their families and loved ones, who continued to endure the pain and loss caused by these heinous crimes.
And because Pickton operated on his farm, it provided him with a secluded and isolated environment in which to commit his crimes. The remote location allowed him to evade detection for an extended period of time.
Wow, I think that's a lot to take in. I'd like to take a moment to grieve for the fallen victims. Before we finish the story, we'd like to say a big thanks to Amazon Prime. In a world of endless possibilities, Amazon Prime stands tall as a premier streaming platform, delivering entertainment, inspiration, and unforgettable experiences to millions of viewers around the globe. But Amazon Prime is more than just an entertainment, it's a lifestyle. With perks like lightning-fast shipping, exclusive deals, and a treasure trove of digital content, Amazon Prime has become an integral part of people's lives.
Amazon Prime has revolutionized the way I shop, watch movies, and even read books. It's like having a world of possibilities at my fingertips. The convenience and variety of content on Amazon Prime are unparalleled. It's become my go-to source for entertainment, and I can't imagine life without it.
Alright, back to the story.
How was Pickton eventually caught?
The investigation into Pickton's activities began in 2002 when the police executed a search warrant related to illegal firearms on his property. During the search, investigators discovered items and belongings that were linked to some of the missing women from Vancouver's downtown Eastside. This discovery raised suspicions and led to a more thorough examination of the property. Over the course of the investigation, the property was meticulously searched and forensic evidence was gathered.
Human remains were found on the farm, including DNA evidence that implicated Pickton in the murders. The remains of numerous women were discovered, although the exact number of victims is unknown, and it is believed that there may be additional victims who were never found. This ultimately exposed the horrifying truth of what had been happening at the farm.
On February 22, 2002, Robert Pickton was arrested and charged with multiple counts of second-degree murder. He was subsequently put on trial, and in 2004, he was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder. The charges related to the deaths of Serena Abbotsway, Mona Wilson, Andrea Joesbury, Brenda Wolfe, Georgina Papin, and Marnie Frey. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years.
While Pickton was convicted for the murders of these 6 women, the investigation into his crimes and the search for further evidence continued even after his conviction. The investigation involved cooperation between multiple law enforcement agencies, such as forensic experts and dedicated investigators who worked tirelessly to bring the justice to their victims and families.
However, as easy as I make it sound, there were some key challenges faced by the investigators and the legal team during this case.
One significant challenge was the sheer scope of investigation. The scale of the farm, combined with the extensive evidence collection and identification process, made it an incredibly complex task for investigators. Additionally, the case drew attention to the vulnerabilities and marginalization faced by sex workers, which raised questions about the police and societal attitudes towards these victims.
Pickton then generally impacted the criminal justice system and society as a whole.
The Pickton case highlighted serious shortcomings in the way law enforcement agencies handled missing person reports, particularly those involving marginalized communities. It sparked debates around police bias, institutional failures, and the needs for better protection and support for vulnerable individuals. The case also prompted changes in how serial killer investigations are conducted in Canada, emphasizing the information of interagency collaboration and sharing information.
So the case of Robert Pickton exposed significant failures in law enforcement's response to the reports of missing women in Vancouver's downtown Eastside, many of whom were later found to be the victims of his crimes. The lack of attention and resources dedicated to investigating these cases allowed Pickton to continue his murderous activities for an extended period of time, when it could have been prevented earlier if taken seriously.
And now we would like to introduce David Little, a forensic engineer, who will be talking about his experiences working with the police.
It's very positive. I highly value my relationship with the police and the working relationship that we have, and it's made me able to do my job. Without it, those who don't have that working relationship have a much harder time doing this job.
It's truly chilling to think about these lives lost and the impact on the victims' families. The loss of their loved ones in such horrific circumstances caused immense pain, grief, and trauma. The families had to grapple with the shock and horror of discovering the fate of their daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends, as well as the knowledge that they had been victims of a serial killer.
The families of the victims had to endure years of uncertainty and unanswered questions before Pickton's arrest and subsequent trial. The trial itself was a highly emotional and challenging process, forcing the families to relive the details of the crimes and face the grim reality of what their loved ones had experienced.
The impact extended beyond emotional trauma. The families also faced various practical and financial hardships. Many of the victims were marginalized and faced significant challenges in their lives. The loss of their loved ones often meant the loss of emotional support, financial contributions, and caretaking responsibilities. This had a profound effect on the families' well-being and stability.
Moreover, the families of the victims had to endure the long and arduous legal process, attending court hearings and advocating for justice. They faced the challenges of navigating the criminal justice system, seeking accountability for the crimes committed against their loved ones.
In the aftermath of the trial, efforts were made to support the families and address their needs. Victim support services, counseling, and financial assistance programs were made available to help them cope with the trauma and rebuild their lives. However, the scars left by the loss of their loved ones and the heinous nature of the crimes are inedible and continue to impact them.
It is important to recognize and empathize with the ongoing pain and suffering experienced by the victims' families. Their lives have been forever altered, and their resilience in the face of such tragedy is remarkable.
That leads to the end of the story, with forgiveness from the victim's family, but never justice for their lives being taken away at such a young age. This story sparked stories all around and eventually led to a legacy.
The legacy of the Pickton case is a painful reminder of the violence and exploitation faced by vulnerable populations. It continues to raise awareness about the need for improved social services, resources, and support networks for sex workers and other marginalized individuals. This case has also highlighted the importance of community engagement and collaboration to prevent and address similar crimes in the future.
It's important to remember the victims and learn from these tragic events. We hope you all remember that this case serves a stark reminder of the following important takeaways.
Systemic failures in the criminal justice system and law enforcement's response to the missing woman in Vancouver's downtown Eastside. It highlighted the need for improved communication, collaboration, and resources to address cases involving marginalized and vulnerable populations effectively.
The second one is victim marginalization. The victims in the Pickton case were predominantly sex workers and women facing addiction and other challenges. Their marginalized status made them more vulnerable to exploitation and violence. The case shed light on the importance of recognition and protecting the rights of marginalized individuals, ensuring their safety, and providing supports and resources to help them escape dangerous situations.
Police bias. This case raised questions about biases within law enforcement that may have contributed to the lack of attention and resources dedicated to investigating the disappearances of the missing woman. It emphasized the need for unbiased and thorough investigations regardless of a victim's background or occupation.
Importance of victim support. The impact on the families of the victims was profound, underscoring the importance of providing comprehensive support services for families affected by violent crimes. Victim support systems, counseling, and financial assistance programs play a crucial role in helping survivors and families navigate the aftermath of such tragedies.
Accountability and justice. The Pickton case demonstrated the importance of holding perpetrators accountable for their crimes and ensuring justice for the victims. It serves as a reminder that no one is above the law and that efforts should be made to prevent such atrocities from happening in the first place.
Awareness and prevention. The Pickton case generated widespread public awareness about the issue of violence against women, particularly those involved in sex work. It sparked conversations about improving social services, providing safer environments for vulnerable individuals, and implementing preventive measures to address the root cause of violence.
Ultimately, the Robert Pickton case serves as a tragic reminder of the profound impact that crimes can have on individuals, families, and communities. It highlighted the need for continuous efforts to address systematic issues, protect vulnerable populations, and strive for a more just and inclusive society.
That's all we have time for today on Beyond Borders. Join us next time as we explore another gripping case that has left a mark on history. Until then, stay safe and keep seeking the truth.
A few honorable mentions to David Little and ChatGPT.
That's all we have time for today on Beyond Borders. Join us next time as we explore another gripping case that has left a mark on history. Until then, stay safe and keep seeking the truth.